Thanks for the download, thanks for the stream, but mostly thanks for tuning in to Coming Up Next, the podcast. And a big thank you to my guest last week. If you haven't listened to it, I was lucky enough to interview Philip Noyce, the legendary Australian director, at his Sydney home towards the tail end of last year, just after he'd won or been awarded the Actor Lifetime Achievement Award. If you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend that you go to comingupnext.com.au, subscribe to the show first, and that way you'll never miss an episode. And then once you've done that, go to last week's episode and check it out. Dave Hearn is my guest this week. Dave is part of an English theatre company called Mischief Theatre, which they started in 2008. Dave... Together they've created some of the more iconic comedy shows that have been on the West End in recent years, most notably The Play That Goes Wrong, which is now all over the world. Dave has had quite an incredible career to date and has just a tremendous story about, creating this show from nothing to it becoming one of the biggest shows on the West End, playing on Broadway, and being produced by J.J. Abrams, of all people. We get into that. We talk about all the usual philosophical stuff. My guest for episode 142 of Coming Up Next, Dave Hearn. I guess it's now 10 years since Mischief Theatre began.
Yeah, we're in 2000. Yeah, so we went to LAMDA in 2007, graduated in 2008, I think. So yeah, 10 years. Yeah.
Wow.
The first show we did was a show called Let's See What Happens in Edinburgh. I think that was 2008 or 2009. I think it was 2008, and that was a car crash, but it was fun. And it's 10 years. So it's weird because I've sort of known people like Henry Lewis, for example, who's the artistic director. I've known him for longer than I've pretty much known anyone else apart from my own family. So I'm getting to that age now where I have long-term friends, which is really weird.
Yeah, that is quite funny. I have a friend, I think my longest running friendships are 30 years or something.
Wow, yeah.
And they're now having kids and families, and I'm making podcasts. And
yeah, it's scary, isn't it, when that happens and you start seeing pictures of people getting married and you're just like, oh no, should I be doing that?
Yeah. Do you kind of feel that with the work that you've been doing over the last sort of 10 years, being that it has, I guess, taken you, around the UK, around Europe, and I guess in the last couple of years over to Broadway as well?
Yeah.
Do you feel as though, committing to a relationship or that kind of part of your life has been neglected?
That's a good question, actually. I think, I guess the short answer is no. I don't feel that. I'm in a long-term relationship at the moment. We've been together for, I think, 6 years, maybe 7 years. Feels like a long time.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, it's really easy to worry about that kind of stuff, I think, especially with social media. And it's really easy to try and project an image of yourself that kind of fits into the kind of construction of what you're supposed to be doing by the time you hit 30, for example. But I think, if you're happy, if one is happy, if I'm happy doing these shows, then I think that's surely a positive thing, I think if I want to get married and go and have a kid, so for example, Nancy, she's a long-term member of Mischief, and she plays Annie and lots of other characters in the shows, and she's married and she's starting a family, and there's nothing stopping her from doing that, and she's still heavily involved in the company and still heavily involved in the shows, obviously to a point, with the danger of the shows, for example. But I think you can feel like you miss out on stuff like that, but it's just whatever you as an individual prioritise as important. And I think we've always had such a good time. And I actually had a weird experience the other day. The boys, the writers, have been off in Vegas writing a new show with some other people. And it's not really a Mischief project, but it's sort of associated with us. And I hadn't seen him for a while. And Henry Shields came back for some leaving drinks for one of our other guys. And I just had... there was loads of people I hadn't seen for ages, and I hadn't seen Henry Shields for like 2 weeks. I just had such a lovely time talking to him. And I realised I was really happy with this group of friends and engaging with them. And you can worry about the type of person that you are or what people think of you. But in that moment, I realised I was like, oh, I've got some really cool friends, and they make me laugh and they make me happy, and I like just sitting here talking to them. And so you don't feel like you've missed out in that respect, I think.
Yeah. You know, you guys have created some of the most successful contemporary theatre on the West End. Certainly in the comedy space. You know, you won the Olivier Award a few years ago for Best New Comedy for The Play That Goes Wrong. You know, performed on television, on Broadway in the last year or so as well. But I wonder if you remember the first time that you did perform, whether it was comedy or straight theatre or whatever, growing up. You grew up in Essex, yeah?
Yes, that's right, yeah. First thing I did, so I reckon, like, my first proper memory of performance, because I didn't actually want to be an actor until I was about 17, but I did a show, like, in primary school. I think they did Alice in Wonderland, and I was the Six of Clubs.
Right.
I imagine I nailed it.
Yeah.
That was fun, like a chorus thing. And then I think I played the Ghost of Christmas Future, Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come in Scrooge, again, primary school. And I think I had all my lines cut because I kept messing around, so they cut all my lines. And I just had to point and wear like a hood.
Yeah.
And then I was quite shy and quite quiet as a kid. And then I started playing rugby, and I kind of came out of my shell a little bit. And I was in secondary school. And I decided to take GCSE drama instead of IT, which arguably was a bad career move because, you know, IT's much more lucrative. But it's worked out, I think, now.
Yeah.
And I did it because I wanted to kind of gain confidence, and I thought that drama would kind of provide that. And I kind of enjoyed doing it, and I remember thinking about being funny. And so, I think you're right, actually. I think probably I did always focus on comedy slightly, because I think I was always told I was funny. And so it's kind of hard to believe yourself to be funny unless you're told it. And I grew up in quite a rough area as well, so we always used to joke about you either learn how to fight or be funny. And often I would try and be funny, and that would get me into fights. And so I was not good at either of them, really.
Right.
But then I remember really enjoying doing drama, and it was the only GCSE I got an A star in. Everything else I got like B's and C's and stuff. I'm nature's B student. I pick things up very quickly. I'm slightly above average, but I'm never the best. And so, I was like, oh wow, I must have really enjoyed that. I must have really kind of like lent myself to it. And so I think the first ever show I did that wasn't part of theatre, wasn't part of education or part of drama, was at the Harlow Playhouse when I did Stags and Hens, and that, I guess, is a comedy, and it's quite a simple play for young people to do. And I have a video of it somewhere, and I remember watching it about a year ago, and it was bad, but it was a good show, and we were doing really well, but we were just very young. But I think I always thought of myself as a straight actor, if I'm honest, and that's probably why I ended up moving towards comedy, because you're trying to take yourself very seriously, and then you end up looking like a fool.
What was your house like growing up? Was it like very kind of jokey, or was it almost the other sort of direction?
I don't. No, it wasn't jokey. Like my family are very very easygoing. Like my mum is very easygoing. She's quite a tense woman, but she's very easygoing, and she loves and hates with the same speed and with the same ferocity, kind of thing. So she will meet you and immediately love you and welcome you into the home. But if you upset one of her kids, basically in the same speed at which you're accepted, you will be denied. And so that's quite a powerful thing to grow up with. And my mum was very much the kind of leading figure in the house, and still is. And my sister, she had a bit of a funny one when she was younger, went off the rails a little bit, but then now she's a doctor of biomedical science.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's properly clever. She's got a PhD, and my dad's a haematologist, so he works in like the labs and stuff on blood and stuff like that. And my mum's, she used to be a cardiac nurse. She was a matron. But she started nursing cadet training when she was 16, and then like rose through the ranks, and then went to Open University when she was about 40. And so that she's a real kind of success story of what you can do if you apply yourself. And she's quite an amazing woman, really. Both my parents are. They're but I wouldn't say, I don't know, I wouldn't say they're like funny people. They are they are funny. I find them funny, but I kind of laugh at them more than with them, I think.
Sounds like a very scientific.
Yes,
household.
very biological. But they always encouraged me to go for whatever it was that I wanted to do. So nothing was impossible until you decided that it wasn't. And so they always supported me. And actually, for me to go to Lambda and do the foundation course, I think they sold one of their cars. We moved house to a cheaper place, so they could afford to send me there. And we applied for funding and stuff like that, but inevitably you don't really ever get it. So incredibly supportive, and they were very supportive of my sister as well. She was in education until she was 29, 30. And so, yeah, it was that kind of encouragement. But I think it was drama school and both Lambda and Rose Bruford, and kind of working with other people that I realised that I was moving more towards comedy rather than like growing up with it, for example.
Yeah. There's something, I guess, inspiring about people laughing. I'm going to say at you, but not at you, but like at something that you've created, like a moment that you've created or that you've inspired. And I guess with all of the goes wrong kind of productions that you guys have done, you've really kind of nailed a scientific element of comedy in a sense.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I think it's I'm not afraid to say people are laughing at you. I think it was Rob who originally played Trevor in Play That Goes Wrong. He said something that I really think is true. Actually, he was like, after every performance of the Play That Goes Wrong, as an actor, you should be a little bit upset and a little bit hurt, because you should, in every scenario, genuinely be trying to do a love scene or try and do a really cool fight scene. And there should be a part of you that's actually trying. And when the audience laugh at you, you know it's within the context of a comedy show. But you should secretly have a moment to yourself when you're like, oh, that's a shame. And you should try not to make them laugh, and you should try and encourage them to buy into the scene.
By playing the truth of...
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's true. I think certainly with the Play That Goes Wrong, I think you can see the progression of us as people and the writers and the maturity of the writing as it goes on. Some of the jokes still are very juvenile and not clever at all. It's just like we'll be looking at a scene and then someone will go, we just need a joke here. And be like, great, I'll just walk into that table and it'll just be a little moment and it's done. But you see, the Play That Goes Wrong is probably a joke every 5 to 10 seconds, and it's just a machine gun of different gags that are now carefully choreographed and the timing so as you say, scientific. And I think if you isolated the final 20 minutes of the show on its own, it's probably not very funny, but because you've whipped everyone up so much, they're just laughing at anything, and somebody comes in and walks into a door and everybody's going mad, and it's really fun. But yeah, I think there is I guess I would be cautious of saying there is a science behind comedy, but I think there is a rhythm that you can generate that the most people will laugh at and most people will get. And I think that's why farces tend to be quite successful, because of the speed at the end. But then some people don't like them because, you know, they can be quite messy if they're not done right. But yeah, I think we've kind of unlocked a psychology, I think, which is that it's not that people like to watch other people fail. I think people like to watch other people try and fail. And I think that's something we just tap into, and we've milked it for all it's worth. I don't know if there are any more Goes Wrong shows in the bank.
No.
I don't know if we could do another one. I don't know what else there is to go wrong. Yeah, because we did a magic show that goes wrong years ago, and then we did the Nativity Goes Wrong, which you can buy the script on, I think, on Amazon. It's like an hour-long show. So there are those that haven't been like commercialised, but yeah, there's only so much stuff that can go wrong before you run out of material.
Yeah, before things start working.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't get people like just coming up to you and suggesting various things that go wrong?
All the time.
Right.
All the time, yeah. I run the email account at Mischief. Well, I don't run it, but I sort of get emails and respond when I can.
Curated.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You'll get people that email in. Some of the ideas are ideas that we've tried before and are not in there for good reason. There are some things where you think, oh, okay, great, thanks for your enthusiasm, but you've slightly missed the point of the show. And then there are ideas for other types of goes wrong shows you can do. And I think it's hard because I think people have a personal background with, like, you know, a certain genre or a certain film, and then people say, oh, you should do this film goes wrong, and it's just like, okay, but that doesn't have like a commercial appeal. It's just you really like that film.
Citizen Kane goes wrong.
Yeah, and you would like to see it, and it's sort of based on the knowledge. You have to create an inclusive environment, I think, with especially with comedy, unless you're like actively choosing not to do that, which is also a legitimate way of doing it, I think. But that's why I think Peter Pan works, because even if you don't know the intricacies of J.M. Barrie's original story, you kind of get what Peter Pan is. The Play That Goes Wrong works because you kind of get what a murder mystery is supposed to be, and I think it's the goes wrong thing exists in that premise because on the assumption that the audience know what each moment is supposed to be. There's a big sword fight in The Play That Goes Wrong. It's clear that is meant to be a fight that happens, and then when it doesn't happen, you get why it's funny. But if you do something very niche that people don't understand and then you subvert it, then it becomes you're relying on the audience to know too much already before you've even done the scene. And that's not very inclusive, I think. The most popular suggestion, though, is Strictly Come Dancing Goes Wrong, and I don't know how much scope there is in that. You know what I mean? I think like there's only so much sort of dancing that you get wrong before it's like maybe there's a good sketch in it rather than a whole play.
It doesn't seem like a sort of 2-hour adventure.
Yeah, with an interval. I mean, I suppose you could write a play based on a kind of dance competition, but you would just have a lot of dances that go wrong. But then you're again relying on the audience knowing what a waltz is supposed to look like in order to make it go wrong. But then maybe there's a funny gag in the waltz is like done in 3 beats, but one of the actors is on 4 beats, and you could just do a very clever sequence where it would take months to choreograph, but you could do it. Yeah.
And again, relying on the audience understanding the time signature of the dance routine.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's making sure that, I think the rule is that we have is that if we find it funny, we should try it. If enough of us find it funny, enough of us laugh, we should try it. Because you've never really any idea of how stuff is going to go down until you put it in front of an audience. And I've always said that like whatever director, whatever team, whatever crew you have, doesn't really matter. The audience are always the best directors because they'll tell you when stuff isn't funny, and you'll feel it as well from them. And different audiences react differently on different nights. But I think, if you try a new joke, you'll know very quickly whether or not it's funny because the audience will tell you.
Totally. So you finish school and you go to Lambda in 2007.
2007. I want to say 2008. Let's say 2008.
2008.
Yeah.
Right. Let's say 2008.
Yeah.
And you meet all these people who you start collaborating with. What was the kind of process of beginning the collaboration even before you decided to name it Mischief Theatre?
I'll let you in on a secret, actually. The company was originally called the Scat Pack because it was to do with improvisational jazz, and it was an improv company. But obviously Scat, sadly, has other connotations.
Shitty connotations.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we changed the name after about 2 or 3 years, maybe. And I sort of knew this before, and I sort of mentioned it, and then we decided as a collective that it wouldn't be a problem. And then it kind of wasn't, but then like you get the odd comment here and there, and you got like T-shirts and posters and stuff, and suddenly you're like, people are like, what is this? And you're like, okay, let's just change the name. But it all started really with, so there's 2 people. There's one guy called Adam Megiddo he runs Showstoppers, and he does loads of improv shows. He's just ran the 50-hour improvathon that was on Stockwell, where they do. I did a 7 or 8 hour stint, and they just improvise for 50 hours straight. And he was teaching us improv at Lambda, and Henry Lewis, artistic director of Mischief Theatre, is an amazing man. He's obsessed with doing projects and starting new things, and he doesn't ever limit himself to anything. And I think he has this belief that you could just get stuff done if you just start doing it, which I really admire. And I think he wanted to start an improv company, and he asked a few people that he thought were good improvisers in the year, and one of them was me, and I said yes. And I think from that original company, there's me, Josh, Henry Lewis, Mike Bodie, and Harry are the 5 kind of original ones from Lambda. But everybody else kind of joined 6 months later or very soon after. And he said, do you want to come and rehearse every Saturday and do improv stuff and practice these things that Adam had been teaching us? And so we started doing it. We put in a bit of money, like a few £100 each, which at the time was like our life savings. And we put on a few shows, and it was mostly friends and family, and our parents kind of supported us. And we were very lucky in that some of the other students at Lambda were from slightly wealthier backgrounds, so they could put in a little bit more money. And we just did shows in small venues around London and tried to take a show to Edinburgh, and funded it all ourselves, lost huge amounts of money, and tried to spent the rest of the year working in restaurants and stuff to kind of build up enough funds to go and do it again. And that's kind of how it started, really. We just built from sort of 25-seater venues to 50-seater venues to 100 to 200 over we were in Edinburgh for maybe 6 or 7 years before The Play That Goes Wrong kind of took off.
It's funny that the kind of further I get into my career as a filmmaker, the more you kind of realise that it really is just about taking such kind of incremental steps.
Yes.
There's the idea of an overnight success is such a myth.
I think there's always on shows like I don't know, maybe it's like Jonathan Ross or like Graham Norton and stuff like that. You always have these actors on there who have been in a film or whatever, and they're suddenly playing alongside Tom Cruise or whatever, and it's great for them, and they're really successful. And I can't remember who it was, but I think it was on Jonathan Ross show. He was interviewing a woman, and he was like, obviously you've just come out of nowhere, and you're doing this big film, and it's really great, and you've been nominated for like all these awards and stuff. I think she won an award for Best Newcomer, and she was like, yeah, it's strange, because I've been a professional actor for nearly 10 years now, and she's been the lead at shows at the National and at the Donmar, and had done lots of other films and had small parts in it, and had made a really successful career out of being an actor. But suddenly this unknown actress has come out of nowhere and sort of taken the world by storm. And you're right, it is those incremental steps where she probably started as a chorus part without any lines in a Fringe show 10 years before, and kind of worked her way out.
And also, I think backing yourself, like you say, you guys were funding your own shows at a loss just to, be in the right spaces, probably not even to be in the right spaces, just because it was what you wanted to do.
Yeah. I think that's very true. And I think some people are very lucky that they can afford to do that. I think we sort of sat in between luck and not luck. I think we believed we could afford to do it, but we couldn't. And there was great kind of sacrifice from a sort of communal and a personal level from everyone, I think, to get where we got to. I think the first Edinburgh where we did Let's See What Happens, which was an improvised play, we lost money. But we individually paid, collectively we paid for like the accommodation and stuff like that. And then the next year we made the money back that we'd lost and made maybe £1,000 or something like that, but it was always enough to take us back to Edinburgh the next year. And then the next year, I think we made like £3,000 profit or whatever, and then the next year 4 and 5, and you kind of build that way until we never really discussed paying ourselves. I think that was the thing. But me and Jono, who's the company director, we used to have this sort of running joke when we were doing Play That Goes Wrong at the Old Red Lion. So we did 2 runs at the Old Red Lion, then it got transferred to Trafalgar, and then we did an extended run, then Edinburgh, and then we started the UK tour in January. And he always used to say, it's just one final push. So we did this Old Red Lion run, and we lost money. And we sort of paid ourselves a bit. And
that's a pub in London.
Yes, in Angel, yeah, and it's theatre. It's a theatre above a pub, and so you often had to contend with crowds downstairs if there was football on.
Right.
There was a dog who lived there who used to bark throughout the performance, which is incidentally where I think the Winston gag came from, about the dog, came from that actual real dog. And so, yeah, he kept saying it's one last push. And I always used to joke, and be like, you say that every time, mate, you say that every time, and then we come back and we do it again and we don't pay ourselves. And by the time it got to Trafalgar Studios, we were doing 2 shows a night, because Trafalgar Studios is great, but it's very expensive, and we only had a 100-seater venue. And in order to make your money back, you have to kind of sell out and sell those tickets at 35 quid, which is a lot for a studio theatre and a lot for an hour-long show. So we started doing 2 shows a night. We did one at 7:45 and one at 9:15. So we turned our 100-seater into a 200-seater. That means we could kind of half the ticket price and try and sell out. But obviously what that meant was I would get up at about 5 a.m. every morning and go and work in a restaurant from about 7 till about 5, 6 at night, and then have lunch and dinner there and stuff. And they were really good, and the chefs would make us food. And then I would leave there and I would go to the theatre, and then we would do these 2 shows. But we didn't have a tech team, so Rob, who played Trevor, was actually operating the show, and the part of Trevor was created by him as actual teching the show.
Out of necessity.
Yeah, and the speech that he does at the start was a speech that we used to have to give to the audience, because when the plats fall at the end, they genuinely fell so close to the audience that we had to tell them to keep their feet away from the stage, because they were kind of sat on stage level. And then he would improvise and chuck in a few bits and pieces there. And the opening of The Play That Goes Wrong in the West End, with them putting up the mantelpiece and doing stuff, was usually because we only had one set, and we would break it quite a lot because we would smash each other into it, and it wasn't really built for purpose. So me and Henry Lewis would usually repair the set whilst the audience were coming in, because we had a 6-minute turnaround to get the audience out and the new audience in. So we were all repairing stuff and repainting stuff in character, but it wasn't part of the show. It was necessary repairs so that we could do the show. And by the end of it, it was being held together by various screws and gaffer tape and stuff. And so, yeah, we were doing that. So I was sort of I'd get home and get to bed at maybe midnight, and then up at 5 again the next day. And so you're kind of doing these 19, 20-hour days. And that went on for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then my days off from the restaurant would be Thursday and Saturday. But then, of course, we would have the matinee performances. So we would be doing 3 shows that day. And then our day off from the show would be a Sunday, but I'd do a double shift, like a 14, 15-hour shift at the restaurant. So I worked out that I didn't get a day off, even Christmas Day. I worked on Christmas Day for about 2.5 years.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of level of work that I was doing. It wasn't just me, other people working in call centres and doing various other jobs. And I remember I was like a millimetre off breaking point with Jono, like with this kind of running joke that we had, one last push. I said to say that every time. And we got to our extended run at Traff. And I was like, I think I lost like a lot of weight, because we were you didn't have time. When do you eat? Like that kind of thing. And you don't have any money as well. And I think I smoked at the time, so that was probably didn't help. And I was just like, once we come back from Edinburgh, I'm going to find another job. I don't think I can be an actor anymore. Like, I love it. I love doing this show. But we've been going now for like 3 years since leaving drama school. I sort of got an agent, sort of didn't have an agent, wasn't really getting any work. And as much as I loved doing the odd gig here and there and doing these little runs, like, you can't sustain a lifestyle like that unless you have a source of money that you don't have to work for, that you just have and people can give you. And John was just like, yeah, I know. I think though something's going to happen. It's going to change. And Rob knew a guy called Mark, and Mark knew a guy called Kenny, and those are our producers, and they came in to see the show. And they wanted to take it on a UK tour. We'd have to write a second act and make the show 2 hours long, because that's how touring venues make their money, with bar sales in the interval. And we talked about it, and we finished Edinburgh, and we did Peter Pan Goes Wrong at the Pleasance. And then we had a 3-week tour booked in January of, I think, 2014 maybe. And that 3-week tour turned into a 26-week tour, and then it kind of sold out, and it got transferred to the West End. And then we were like, oh, okay, cool, we're West End actors. And I got paid more money than I'd ever been paid in my life. And then that finished, and we did Peter Pan and Bank Robbery, and all of those things just started to happen because the writers had time to write during the day because they weren't working in restaurants, and we had time to workshop new shows and come up with new ideas. And so the big changing point for us was Kenny Wax and Mark Bentley's kindness of coming to see the show, of actually coming to see it, but also our hard work, our just relentless nature of just keeping going. And I think not a lot of people know this actually, but I went to see a doctor after that run, and I was diagnosed with clinical fatigue,
right.
Which I didn't know was a thing. And I said to the doctor, I was like, "What is that?" And he was like, "Basically, you're just really tired." And I was just like, "Okay," because I thought there must be something wrong with me. I was like, "I'm so tired. I'm so ill. I'm not myself. I'm all of these things." And he was like, "You're not eating or sleeping or drinking properly, and stop smoking." And so. Yeah, that's the kind of like toll that it took on me. But it wasn't just that's my story, but like other people in the company have similar narratives. And so I think that's scary. That's the level of commitment that it took to get us where we are. And that's where it started. And now it's really easy because we have royalties, profit share, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's great fun.
Yeah.
But I think I always think that when I speak to actors or people, creative filmmakers, and people who make podcasts or whatever. Because it can be very disheartening, I think. And it won't happen for everyone, and that's a scary thing. That's a scary thing to see. It just easily could have... I could tell the story up to that point and then be like, and then nothing happened. And we had this play that goes wrong, which is our show that we always talked about, but it never went anywhere. And so I think... And I could have quite easily got another job doing something else, had those people not come in. And I think it's scary because often the trajectory of your career path is often decided by somebody else. And I think that's you have control up to a point, and once you kind of release that control and kind of go, okay, cool, so I can only ever do as much as I believe that I can do, and then once I've exhausted that, it's up to other people. Because you can make a podcast, but it's up to people to listen to it, or it's up to, I don't know how it works, like a channel to take it on or whatever. And I think that's a really scary prospect for a lot of people, and I think that's what gets people in the end in terms of acting and creative jobs, is that you rely so heavily on other people to open doors for you.
Well, I think it depends. A lot of that sort of comes down to how you define success, or how you kind of what your benchmarks are in terms of what it means to quote unquote make it, or create sustainability for yourself. And I think that there's something to be said for having that kind of tenacious grit that you talk about, where you're like, I'm devoted to this. I'm dedicated to making this happen, and that means that I'm going to get 4 hours of sleep a night. You're not even really consciously making the decision. I guess at that time you're just doing what needs to be done to get things done. Yeah,
it's very true. I think as well, like to be clear, that I don't think. I think it's important that the opposite is true. Is that if you are not finding success, or if you are whatever your perception of making it is, or success and failure is that it's really important for people to understand that it's not because they are not trying hard enough. I think that's a big problem in a creative environment, in acting and in creative jobs. This notion that you don't want it enough, and I think it's the X Factor and The Voice and all of those horrible shows that people kind of go on and showcase themselves. And the judges just say things like, you've got it because you want it. You want it more than she does, or he wanted it more than you. Of course, everybody wants it. And it's just this idea that if you wish hard enough, or if you want it hard enough, then you'll get it. And if you didn't get it, it's because you didn't try hard enough. Rather than accepting that lots of things are out of your control, and you can only work and try as hard as long as you go home at the end of every day being like, yeah, no, I gave everything today, and I'm unwilling to give any more, and I'm happy with that. I think that some people can get hung up on it of just being like, why isn't it working for me? Is it because I don't try hard enough? But I think of course you do if you care about it, and if you feel that you're not trying hard enough, then maybe it's not the thing for you. Maybe something else will inspire you more. And
I think the sort of shows that you mentioned, by and large, look, I haven't watched any for a long time, but
they're very similar.
Those are kind of like the people who want that overnight success ticket, I'm imagining, by and large, the sort of people that will go on those shows or try to make their career or use that as a springboard for their career. I'm not saying that people who go on them aren't necessarily talented or don't work hard. I'm sure there are a lot of people who do and are both of those things. But I think there are probably a lot of people that go into that environment going, I'm going to be found here, or I'm going to be discovered. And I think that the whole notion of that is disempowering to creative people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, like you say, it's your own version of success. And I think if you go into it with the notion that you are in control of being discovered or becoming famous, I think that can only serve to frustrate you, because I think that ultimately, if you go on a show like X Factor and you go, great, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show everyone that how good I am at singing, and I want to be a pop star. That's my dream. So I'm going to go in and give everything I can and work hard and not smoke and not drink and listen to my vocal coach and do all those kind of things. And I don't know, listen to Simon Cowell's advice and all of those sorts of things. And if you do all of those things and you still don't make it, it's not because other people don't care or because you haven't tried hard enough. It's just because so much is out of your control. And I think if you go into it with that attitude, you'll ultimately be much happier experiencing it and then understanding that failure is just a part of life. And I've been overusing this phrase because I think I made it up, but maybe it sounds better in my head than it is in life. So I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, it was one of the actors in Bank Robbery. And she was like, I had to go back in an emergency cover last week. I haven't done it for a year. Just kind of stepped back in and had a go. And it all went pretty well. Nobody died, and I remembered most of it. And she said, how is it your level of experience of having done the show or acting that means that it's easy for you to step back in? I said, first of all, it's not easy. I was still nervous because it's still an important thing. And it's also these new guys, it's their show, and I'm kind of coming in to patch over a crack that's happened. And I said, in terms of experience against other actors, there are people in their 90s still performing who have been performing for longer than I've been alive, and they're truly experienced. But I said, actually, I think all that experience comes down to is just a familiarity with failure. And I think the more that you fail as you perform and as you do things, the more familiar you become with it and the less it bothers you. And that enables you and that empowers you to make bolder choices in terms of acting, or if you're a writer, it makes you kind of go, do you know what, actually, yeah, I'm going to write that character in, or I'm going to do something crazy. Or, you might decide to do a podcast on top of a mountain as a creative choice because you're not worried so much about failure. And I think that's a really important thing for those people that go on to X Factor or go on to those kind of shows. Because like you say, it's not because they're not working hard, and it's not because people who write shows and create theatre aren't working hard. It's just becoming familiar with failing. And we've failed a lot as a company, and we fail on a daily basis, and that's kind of the joy of it. Like 90% of what you do doesn't succeed. It's the 10% that people see. So there's always this facade of a company that's successful. And of course, like, that's how you want to appear, because people want to come to things that they know are going to be successful. Behind it is hours and hours of writing, hours and hours of workshop, arguments over characters, people coming up with new jokes, trying them, failing, feeling bad about it, And so there's lots of, and then there's the whole story of how you get there anyway. So there's lots of kind of darkness behind the light. And I think that's, I think it's important for people to know that you will fail a lot before you succeed.
Yeah. And I think, not to sound a bit fucking esoteric, but you fail forward. So you're always like learning from your failures. Yeah.
And I think it's, there's like, it's a very American ideal, I think, of this idea of just like not giving up. Sometimes people give up because it's hard, and like, you want to have a kid and you don't want to be an actor getting paid 50 quid to do like a rehearsed reading at some theatre that you've never heard of, and like, that's fine. And I think certainly there's a thing, I don't know if I'm right about this, but I think there's a thing in the arts, a perception of the arts from people who are not in the arts, that if you give up, it's hard because we're not being recorded on TV, so I'm doing quotation marks at the moment. Medium. Yeah. So if you give up, quotation marks, then you have failed. And so if I said I want to become an ambulance driver or a doctor or a paramedic or whatever, and after 2 years of training and giving it a go, I say it wasn't for me, everyone will kind of go, oh, that's a shame, what are you moving on to? But if I say I'm going to be an actor, everyone goes, oh wow, that's hard, it probably won't work out for you. After 2 years it doesn't work out, and I go, I'm going to go and do something else. People are like, oh, you've given up on acting, because it feels like a stupid thing to start to do. Yeah. And like it feels like a thing that is as a dreamer's job. And and I thought that about, I met someone who's like, I was a poet, and I was like, come on, what was that? You can't be a poet. Like, that's stupid. But of course it's not stupid. It's a job, and it's creative, and I have no right to think that. And I ended up talking to the guy about what he does, and I was like, oh right, yeah, you do spend your days like writing and doing stuff and failing all the time. And so I think that's the perception that can be difficult for some people, because I think in other jobs, if you choose not to do them, it's exciting. Wow, you're quitting your job to go do something else. How exciting.
You're going to pursue your passion of being an actor.
Exactly. But if you decide not to be an actor, it's like, oh, you failed, you've given up. And I think that's sometimes it's a driving force, but I think that's a hard thing for people to accept. And I think at the end of the day, if the lifestyle of being an actor doesn't make you happy, then you shouldn't pursue it. But also, don't be... Whenever I do like Q&As and stuff, I keep using this word failure, but I think it's such an important one of not being afraid of it, because I think that's what restricts you literally and moment by moment in your performance, if you're scared of failing. But also, if you look at it on a much wider scale, as a theatre company, if you're starting a comedy company, if you're scared of failing and it not succeeding, then you kind of don't have a drive to start it in the first place.
Yeah, and I think being afraid of failure is natural, but to allow that to kind of block or hinder your progression or evolution is, it's kind of pointless, because you'll never get anywhere, really. Yeah,
I think being afraid of it is, like you say, is natural and often a good thing. There are some things that we haven't even tried in shows because we're just like, that won't work. We're too scared. Yeah. And I think... there are some stories of, we've done shows we did an improv show to 6 people, and there was 8 people in the cast. And like Jono came out before and said, hello everyone, we haven't started the show yet, but obviously we're not expecting any more people. Do you want us to do the show? And that's it. Those 6 people were like, yeah, absolutely, definitely, please do a show for us. And we came out and we did our show, and they had a great time, and it was fun for those 6 people. But that was a real experience of failure, of it cost more to get us all into the theatre than it did for those 6 people to come. I think those experiences are important. And, we've done some shows where the houses have been packed, especially improv stuff, and they've gone down so badly. And, like, you just go, oh, wow, that was 300 people that are going to leave thinking that was a bad show, and they're going to tell all their friends. And those things are scary. And I think, but yeah, you become familiar with them, and you learn a new experience, and you start to learn that you can't control what people think of the show. You can only try and do the best show that you can possibly do. And that's quite a freeing thing, I think.
And also, when robots eventually take over all the jobs, the only ones that will remain will be the artistic ones. So.
I thought of this about, like, what could you... If somebody created AI that was really intelligent, could you program it to be an actor? Could you program it so that, assuming the robot can't feel emotion, but it can... display it. It can, and it looks real. It looks like a person displaying emotion. Because often, I think when acting, like, you've done a show 200 times, you're not really feeling it. You're just good at doing it now. And I think, if you could create a robot, would people still come and see it? Because the robot won't get tired, and the robot won't change its performance. You will see the robot perform, and then actually, will the new artistic appreciation be in the programmer for the robot? Like, rather than having a good actor or a good director or a good writer, you would have somebody would program a robot to give a performance, and then at the end that program would come out and take a bow, because he or she is the one who's done all of the artistic and the creative work. But you have a guaranteed...
This is like the next level of puppetry.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I mean, in thousands of years, would that be a thing? And would people still go and see it? Would people see that show? Would they, knowing that it's a program, knowing that it gets turned on and off each night, but would you pay money to go and see something? But you also have the security of knowing that it's going to be good. It's going to be, like, millimetre perfect, and it's going to be the same every single time. And unless there's a power cut, there won't ever be a problem. But I don't know, I feel like that's that's kind of what TV offers when you see repeats of stuff. You know, I started rewatching Friends because it's on Netflix. There's a security in that because I know what it is.
It's comfort food.
But then if I go to the theatre, there's a nervousness every time you watch because I don't know. Like I'm trying to get tickets to see Network to see Bryan Cranston in it. And there will be something really exciting about sitting in an audience and watching him walk out and be like, oh, that's Walt Whitman. That's the guy from Malcolm in the Middle. Like, that's really cool. He's right there, and you know, he might forget a line, and that's really exciting. So I don't know if robots took over, if you'd want to take it away,
break it down to that. Yeah. So what was we've gone off on a huge
robot tangent.
Robot tangent. What was the kind of initial stage, you know, because the play that goes wrong was originally The Murder Before Christmas. And that was the third improv show that you guys had done collectively.
The third... No, that was the first scripted...
It's the first scripted show.
Yeah.
Okay.
First probably scripted one.
So what was the kind of conception phase of that like?
So, if I'm honest, we've been doing improv for a little while. Had we done Mogic by that point? I think we had. We'd done Mogic, which was a Goes Wrong show, which was technically the first ever Goes Wrong show that we'd done. And it was me, Henry Lewis and Jono. But yeah, the conception of Murder Before Christmas was because we wanted to make money, basically. We weren't making money. We wanted to make money out of being an actor. And it was kind of scary to admit that, actually, but I think that was why we did it. We were like, cool, improv doesn't really get any money. You can charge people £5 for a ticket. And even now, like when we do improv shows, we're probably more likely to do them for charity because people are still like, I don't know if I want to pay for something that might be bad. So yeah, it was Henry Lewis had gone to this theatre called the Questors Theatre in Edinburgh Broadway, which is like a youth kind of theatre and community theatre. There's a guy called Michael Green who's done a lot of stuff there, and he's written a book in the art of course acting, which is basically kind of what we do, Goes Wrong stuff. It's clown stuff, and he's written loads of short plays that are like 20 minutes long, and it's really funny. And there's like for example, there's a really funny scene where loads of people are sat at a really long dinner table, and halfway through the scene their legs fall off, and the table lands on the people sat underneath its legs. And there's loads of entrances and exits, but obviously no one could leave the table because if they do, it'll tip. So they play the whole scene as if they're leaving and trying to kind of leave and like hide themselves. And it's just a very short, very silly, very funny scene. And so Hen really liked that style of comedy, and he'd written the clock on the barometer scene where everything falls off the wall and they have to hold it all up. And he'd written this short sketch. And so him and Jono and Henry Shields lived together at the time, and they wrote the whole thing in about a week, the sort of first draft of it. It was about 50 minutes long. It needed a lot of work, and it was a bit dry, and some of the scenes were a bit disconnected, and they brought it to us and we read it, and Hen was like, look, we've got a bit of money left over from Edinburgh, we can try and... he'd already done a show, Mercury Fur, at the Old Red Lion, and knew the artistic director quite well, and said, do you want to rehearse this play and try and put it on? We'll try and build it. And we did, and it was kind of very, very, very basic scenes, and I saw a recording of it recently. I think there's one on the internet somewhere, like very first performance, and it's really slow and really dry and really kind of like nice and sort of funny, but it's not as hectic as it is now. And it was sort of born out of just a few ideas strung together with a loose narrative, and it was called The Murder Before Christmas because we wanted to do a show at Christmas because people go and see theatre at Christmas, and we wanted to kind of do an alternative kind of panto-y sort of thing. It wasn't a panto, but like just a comedy show, like a clean comedy show that families can come and see and stuff. And that's kind of where it started.
I mean, people definitely know what they're getting when they go to one of your shows.
Yeah, we changed the name, Play That Goes Wrong, just because I think there was genuinely some confusion about what it was. Because I think we wanted to get an audience in that knew they were coming to see a comedy. And we genuinely had a few people come in that had bought tickets to see a murder mystery, and then were very disappointed when so much stuff went wrong, and couldn't quite realise why people were laughing and stuff like that, and didn't realise why people were looking at the audience, and they were few and far between, but there were some genuine misunderstandings, and people wanted their money back. And so I think we were like, okay, let's just call it The Play That Goes Wrong. People know they're coming to see a comedy. And so actually, we don't have to warm them up every show. It doesn't take them 15 minutes to realise that it's supposed to be going wrong. They can just laugh from the outset and enjoy themselves, and we can do all the hard work. We don't expect them to do anything. We can tell the story and sell the jokes, but we don't have to kind of wait for them to catch up. Because there's some good jokes at the start, and if you're just sat there being like, what is this? Then you miss a lot of that fun stuff.
How long did you do it on the West End before you personally handed over, your role to a new group of actors?
I think we're on a 9-month contract, or it might have been a year. So we went to the West End in September, and then September of 2014 or 2015, and then we ran through until the following year, and we extended through the summer. And so it was basically September till September, and that was a weird experience actually, because we'd done obviously from the Old Red through to Traff, then Edinburgh, then the tour, then the West End, and so we'd been kind of doing the play for nearly 2 years straight at that point. And I think it was 2 years before we handed it over to another cast. And we were quite heavily involved in the recast, and the audition process was very, very long. Now we're much less precious about it, I think, because it was such a big deal to hand over, because it was the only thing we had, and we didn't want anyone to mess it up. And then actually realised that the more you kind of try and tighten your grip on it and make sure you do enough rounds, and I just want to see that person one more time, and I want to see if they can do it. And I ended up sort of saying to people like, there's no point in trying to see if they can get exactly what you want in a rehearsal, because in an audition, because you have a rehearsal for that whole process. You just have to trust that you've made the right decision. And obviously now it's on all over the world, and so there are shows happening that I've never even seen the cast. So I think it's trusting. It's also trusting as well that the material that we've created is good enough. I think that's the scary thing. You assume it's always the actors, but actually if the foundations are there and the direction is there, then the show will always be good.
Did you hand it over because you were told you had to, or was it because it was time so that you could create new work, or what was the thinking?
I think it was, we were never told by the producers or anything like that we were always offered, and they were always happy for us to stay on if we wanted to, because the show was going so well, and at that point we'd just started to kind of sell out and make our money back. I think we wanted to finish because I think we wanted to try and do Peter Pan and that Christmas anyway. But also, I think you should change after that long. I think because the jokes stop becoming funny to you, and the love for it goes, because it is just repetition. And you go through a weird cycle of where you become so good at it. And I remember realising that the place where I was least nervous and least worried and least engaged and least switched on in my entire life and in the whole world was for 2 hours every night on stage in front of 500 people. And I could go through, at one point I remember going through a whole performance, the last half of the performance. I came off stage and I said to John, I was like, did I get everything right then? And he was like, yeah, it was fine. I was like, did I say all the lines right? He went, yeah. I was like, and all the jokes landed? He went, yeah. And I was like, great. And I couldn't remember it at all. And so that was when alarm bells started ringing, because I was like, oh, I'm not invested in the show in the same way. And I think there's this worry that we're not grateful enough. You're not grateful for what you have. But I don't begrudge any actor after doing something for 2 years straight to want to leave it, especially if it's a comedy, because you do forget why things are funny. And I know it sounds weird, but like, you tell a joke, you've told it, and we've done over 1,000 performances. So, there's a section where the lines loop around, and it happens 5 times in each show. So those guys have said those lines 5,000 times. And so you go mad. Henry Shields has screamed at Ledger probably close to 10,000 times. So it's just kind of like, it's important that you take time away from it, I think. And also we found as well, like, we were going to keep people on, and we tried to move understudies up with new cast and stuff like that. But I think you should replace a cast every year in a farce. I think it's important that you do. I think for safety, because of the nature of the show, there's lots of physical stuff, and you're often responsible for somebody else's safety. So it's important that you have new people in to look after each other. And also, it just makes it fresh. It just keeps it fresh and keeps audiences engaged. There's nothing worse than going to see a comedy and saying, yeah, it's really good, but the cast look tired. They look like they're ready to finish. And so I think regardless of how good or bad somebody is, you just replace everyone after a year. And some people come back after a few years and do the show again, and that's fine. But yeah, I think you have to I think if you're still enjoying a show after that long, you probably have an unhealthy relationship with the show. But some people do. I know in Broadway people stay in shows as long as they can.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I hate to see it as a job. Somebody's calling.
I don't think I've ever heard that phone ring before.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, that's exciting. You should answer it. And we should see who it is.
I'm not going to answer.
No.
No.
That's so weird. Who calls a landline?
Yeah.
It'd be like a one of those people saying you've been in an accident. Oh, that's you?
That's not my voice, no.
Oh, is it not?
No.
Nothing.
Telemarketer.
There you go.
Yeah.
And after that brief hiatus, the drama is over.
Yeah. This is now the podcast that goes wrong.
Wow, so many different voices. That was fun.
That was fun.
So yeah, I think it's we wanted to leave after a while, and you're right, actually start new projects, and the dream is that the show can run without us, which it can now, and it's kind of scary releasing that. It's like letting go of a child, but I think now the show can run, it can be cast without us. We tend to help cast it just because it can get done a lot faster. We know what to look for, and audiences tend to be weirdly slightly more reassured if we've had a hand in the casting process.
So when J.J. Abrams comes knocking and brings the show over to Broadway, I guess that reignites a certain level of enthusiasm for you guys to then take the show and do it in a new environment.
Yeah, I think there's always a level of enthusiasm with all of the shows we do that is permanent, but it's also making sure that you are always engaged with it in the same way, and if you feel that you're not, then it's time to go, because somebody else will be. I think when JJ came to see the show, there was already talks with Kevin McCollum, who's the lead US producer, and he's great. He's done a lot of hard work for us. And then it's hard transferring it to Broadway because there's so much money involved. It's crazy how expensive things are. But when he came to see it and was just like, "Yeah, I love it. Let's get it over." And obviously for him, it's quite a big step in terms of creatively, because he's never had anything to do with theatre, and I don't know how much money he put in, but I imagine it was quite a big financial commitment, and also like a kind of personal and a career commitment to put his name on a Broadway show that may or may not be successful, and to be related to that in some way. But yeah, they said. There was discussion because the equity rules in Broadway are very strict, so you have to have very specific reasons why a foreign cast can come over and perform it. And part of the stipulation was that we would do a maximum of 6 months and then leave, which I think was long enough for us anyway. But we got to live in New York, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. And
so I think, yeah, he came to see it, and I wasn't too sure who he was, to be honest. I hadn't watched a lot of his stuff. And then I realised, and I sort of looked him up, and I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, I know exactly who he is. He's done loads of really, really amazing things." And he was so kind and lovely. We got him in the show at one point. He came to see us. He was really sweet, actually, because I think he kept going back to LA. But while we had a 10-day tech period to help the cast and to help the crew get used to it, because obviously we knew the show, so it was for them to kind of learn it. And he was there pretty much every day, just watching. Seeing how it was directed and offering ideas and stuff. Some were good, some were bad. And he kept going, "I've got to go back, I've got to go to LA." And he would leave and then literally arrive the day later. And he was like, "I don't know what it is, I can't stay away." And he watched like the first 3 or 4 shows and just was there watching the audience and just seeing kind of how it was created and watching us work with each other. And I think he's from an environment where he's in charge and he tells people what to do, and he's obviously a very creative man, and he listens to everyone, but I think he'd never worked in an environment that was so ensemble focused and everyone had an equal say. And stuff is done by a committee, which I think takes a long time, but it means you get a good result. And so yeah, he was kind of weirdly obsessed with just how the show was being built and created. And he came back a few times and watched the show from backstage, and we would show him how to do some of the backstage stuff and some of how the tricks worked and all that kind of stuff. And then at the top of Act 2, there's a bit where the curtain goes up and everybody kind of freezes because they're all putting everything away. The curtain goes back down, bounces straight back up, and everyone's in their correct position. And so we said to him, "Do you want to come on in that sequence?" And he was just stood in the middle of the stage, barking orders at everyone, froze, looked out, got a round of applause, the curtain went back in, and then he ran off. But we had to rehearse that because there's ladders and stuff swinging around, and we were just like, he was just like, "Will I be will I be okay? And we're like, yeah, we're going to rehearse your track, because otherwise you are going to get taken out with a ladder or a falling door or something. So yeah, he was, and he's great. We went to Charlie and I went to see him at his office in Bad Robot, and he was obviously very busy, but we had a tour around Bad Robot and stuff, and he's just been like really kind to us and really open, and we've been out for dinner with him and just chatted about his films and stuff and what it's like to direct a big Hollywood movie. And he's just like, yeah, it's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird, but it's fun.
It's weird. Even when you're at that level, there's still that kind of mystique, I guess, about it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of I don't know what the word is actually. There's a lot of something surrounding him because of the Star Wars franchise and the shift and who's producing it and who's directing it, and that's a thing where like fans have such a strong opinion about it, and he just wants to do a good film. I think he just wants to create good work and honour this wonderful kind of saga. He doesn't really have a hidden agenda. He just wants to be a good director and make a good film. And like Bad Robot is such a wonderful place. It's a toy shop for adults, and people are allowed to create stuff there, and without risk of, there's no deadlines or. It took me a while to kind of get used to it because Mischief has been built on a lot of kind of like very creative but very hard driven work, and to go into this environment where people are allowed to just make stuff for the sake of making stuff and just do cool things, just make music for no particular purpose other than just because you like this instrument or whatever. And so yeah, he's a real facilitator, I think, and he's very clear on what he wants, but he's also very malleable and very open and very engaging and just very kind. I think the higher you get up the ladder, you realise that the people that are successful are kind, and the people who are stuck in the middle or at the bottom are there not because they're not talented, but because there's usually some kind of bitterness or aggression from down below. And I think it's really easy to perceive people at that level as sort of, because they don't have time for everyone, because everybody knows who they are, and it's hard. But yeah, he was wonderful to us, very kind, and obsessed with comedy now.
Yeah, right. What was it like, I guess, to franchise the show then? Have you franchised it in the kind of traditional sense where it's like you send it out into the world and it's kind of, this is a show by numbers now, or is there...
That's kind of an ongoing thing, actually. I think we're kind of having that discussion and that sort of, I want to say problem, but it isn't really a problem. It's a discussion with Bank Robbery at the moment, because we're moving, the current cast finish at the end of this month and a new cast start end of February, and that's a hard thing because you get actors in on the strengths of their performance. Play That Goes Wrong is kind of directed and acted by numbers now, but you have to be malleable because different actors bring different things, and certainly actors deliver certain jokes in different ways, or develop a character that's within the confines of the structure, but we have to be malleable and flexible in terms of how we write stuff for them. And we try to keep everything the same, because if you deviate too much, then the show isn't what it was originally, and that nobody enjoys that, I think. But also we have to allow for people, and actors especially, creativity. I think an environment that we've always tried to create with Mischief is, you get in real trouble if you have actors directing other actors, because you just have loads of subjective opinions about how each moment should work. But actors shouldn't be afraid to start creative conversations with other people. You know, another actor should be able to approach another actor and be like, I used to get a laugh from this joke, why isn't it working? And that actor should feel confident to be like, yeah, you're doing a weird thing with your face, or you've slowed the line down, or you're not really listening, or you're speeding up. And we should create an environment where actors can engage in that way, and actors can engage with directors in a way that is, they should be able to ask questions. Okay, I don't get this joke, or they should be able to, if they have another joke, always open to suggestions. And so I think that's it's just treading that line between, here is the structure, here is how you have to perform, but also let's explore other ideas. And usually people come up with stuff that we have tried before, and we've intentionally not put it in because of that failure from before, and people are very respectful of that kind of stuff. But yeah, in terms of franchising it, it's trying to keep it true to how it started, that it's meant to be fun. I think it was Alan Ayckbourn that said you should never finish writing a farce. Like, you should always keep it updated, because it will go out of fashion so quickly. I don't know how 40 Towers has managed it. That's never gone out of fashion. But I think, I think you should keep, it should be ever changing, and it should adapt to the cast that you have. So it sort of treads the line between very strict, and it also has to be very strict for safety, but very strict and also having a kind of small amount of creativity.
Well, it's now playing on every continent except Antarctica.
I believe so. Yeah.
Or has played.
I think maybe we should try and go down and do a performance. And
play that goes wrong on ice.
Yeah, exactly. I think we worked out when we were in New York that at one point it was playing. It was because it was in so many different time zones. It was technically playing 24 hours a day for about 2 days.
That's pretty cool.
So when one show closed, another one would have either already started or another one would be opening. So there was a global play that goes wrong.
Yeah.
In theory, if you could fly from one country to the other and always see a performance, which would be really cool.
That would be very cool. Are you guys working on a new show at the moment?
So there's a couple of things in the pipeline. Some of the writers have written stuff individually. Henry Lewis has written something which is really cool, and Jono's done a few bits, and I know Shields is always working on different things. And we've had a couple of read-throughs of those things, but they're in very early stages, and they're we can decide as a company whether or not we want to kind of pursue those things. And actually, to be honest, everyone in the company has sort of written something, and we've done read-throughs and stuff. There's some TV projects that the guys are working on, but it's hard to kind of say really, because TV stuff takes so long, and they had something that was getting very close and now might not be, and it's all kind of up in the air. It's hard to kind of say until you get something commissioned and you're filming. I think once you start filming something, then you can be like, cool, we're doing this new thing. And then even then, it may not ever make it to TV. So there's some TV stuff, possibly some more theatre stuff, and some stuff that I'm very excited about. But we have, again, a lot of it isn't in our control. We have to wait for other people.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for stopping by, Dave.
Not
Really appreciate your time and your insights. I end all of my podcasts with the same question, which is, what makes you silly?
What makes me silly? What makes you silly? My keeping in the theme of the interview, my desire to fail. It makes me silly.
Right.
Because I think it's a silly desire to have.
Well, most people have a desire to succeed, so you have a desire to fail.
Yeah, if I keep failing, I will eliminate all avenues of possible failure. So the only thing left will be success.
Success, right. It's the kind of extreme version of every no is one step closer to a yes.
Yeah, you know what's right, but knowing what's wrong. And I think, and also as well, like, I think I've made a career out of failure, going on stage and failing every night. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes not. And I think, I have to honour that. I have to respect that.
Yeah.
And also, I fall over for money. That's pretty silly.
That's pretty silly.
Yeah. I get like voluntarily hit in the face with things, and someone gives me a check at the end of every week, and that's my life.
And you dislocated your shoulder during a performance.
Yeah, dislocated both of them. Had a problem with one recently, actually, so I've had surgery on both of them now. But the right one is more secure than the left. But I have shallow joints apparently, so that happens.
That's a thing.
So yeah, it happened. The right one happened during a research and development for one of the tricks for the play that goes wrong at a circus school, and the other two times, one happened in Trafalgar Studios. Henry Lewis threw me over a chaise longue, and I landed awkwardly, dislocated halfway through a show, and then the other one happened on the West End, holding up a picture frame. We had to stop the show.
You had to stop the show.
The second one, the one on the West End, we had to stop the show because it was in the first act. And Rob, who played Trevor, was my first cover at the time. So Rob had to come on and finish the show as Trevor, but in the part of Max. Apparently it was very weird, but very funny. And then in the Traff was the 1 hour performance, so I went off, and it was the end of the scene anyway. And it was actually at that point, the way it was written, I would die at that point anyway. I didn't really have to come on, and just did some backstage stuff. So I went to hospital, and then Rob came on to fill in as the dead body. And then apparently at the end, everyone took a bow, clapped, and da-da-da. Then Rob came forward and made a speech and said, "You might notice that Dave isn't taking a curtain call with us. He actually did injure himself throughout the show and has gone to hospital. He's completely fine, but we just wanted to let you guys know. Thanks very much for coming and safe journey home." And it got a big laugh, and nobody left the theatre because they all thought it was part of the show. Until the front of house had to come in and be like, no, please leave. The show is now finished.
Right.
And I remember getting into a cab in the interval, actually, of the West End one, and a guy was outside having a cigarette, and I was getting into a cab to go to hospital. And he sent a little beer to the theatre afterwards because he was laughing, because he thought it was part of the show. One of the actors went off injured. And I was like clutching my shoulder and getting into a cab and like crying because I was in so much pain. Yeah. And he messaged us saying, "I'm really sorry, I was laughing at that actor, but I thought it was part of the show."
I'm just so committed that you actually got in a cab.
Yeah, I think maybe he thought we'd get in a cab and then drive round the block and I'd get out and go back in the theatre or whatever. But he was like, "Oh, I didn't realise until the end when he didn't come out for the curtain call that something must have been wrong." And so he felt really bad.
That's pretty silly.
Yeah, that was very silly. But yeah, I think we've had a few injuries, but that's probably the most like serious one, I think.
Yeah.
Injuries being silly.
Yeah, that's pretty silly. Thanks so much, Dave.
No worries. Thank you for having me.